A millionaire forced his daughter to marry a simple, humble farmer, but was shocked when he saw her again. Isabella Whitmore, the only daughter of William Whitmore, one of New York's most influential businessmen, epitomized a life of luxury and excess. Surrounded by exclusive parties and lavish trips, Isabella had an attitude that the world was at her feet. Her reckless behavior worried her father, who had tried everything to make her see the value of things, but without success. One day, William decided to put his drastic plan into action. He asked Isabella to come to his office. She entered, raising an eyebrow when she saw her father's serious expression. "Isabella," William began, keeping a firm tone, "if you want to inherit my business or any part of my money, you'll have to accept one condition." "Condition?" Isabella laughed scornfully. "Dad, you know I won't accept any condition that involves giving up what is rightfully mine." William remained unperturbed. "You will only inherit the family fortune if you agree to marry Jacob Miller, a farmer in Texas." Isabella widened her eyes and was silent for a moment. Then she burst into laughter. "A farmer? Are you kidding, right? Me? Married to someone like that? Dad, I've tolerated your attempts to teach me life lessons, but this is too much." "I'm not joking, Isabella," William replied firmly. "Either you accept the marriage and spend a year on the farm with him, or you lose everything." Incredulity and anger took over her. "You would really do this to me? If it's necessary to teach you the value of things, yes." He took a deep breath and added, "Jacob is an honest, hardworking, and decent man. He can show you a world you've never seen." That night, Isabella pondered what her father had said. Losing her inheritance? Not in her worst nightmares had that crossed her mind. But marrying a farmer? It was something she could hardly conceive. Still, resigned, she agreed. However, the next meeting made her even more uncomfortable. When Jacob arrived at the Whitmore mansion to meet her, Isabella was sitting, haughty, with an expression that suggested she was forced to endure the presence of someone inferior. Seeing the simple man enter, she analyzed every detail, from the worn hat to the dirt-stained leather boots. "So you're the famous Jacob Miller," Isabella commented, crossing her arms and raising her chin disdainfully. "I didn't expect anything less from a farmer." Jacob, with a calm look, replied without being shaken. "And you are the famous Isabella Whitmore, the spoiled heiress of New York?" She let out a dry laugh. "You don't waste time, do you? You must be eager to get your hands on my family's fortune." Jacob crossed his arms, looking at her intently. "Money isn't what brought me here, Isabella. Your father made a proposal to benefit my community. I'm here for them, not for you." She rolled her eyes as if she didn't believe it. "Do you really think I'm going to spend a year on a farm? With you?" "That's your problem," he replied. "But if you're in my house, you'll have to live by my rules." "Rules?" she scoffed. "Don't make me laugh. I didn't come here to play farmer, much less to follow orders from someone like you." Jacob stepped forward, his gaze hard. "Then maybe you should think twice before speaking. I didn't ask to be here, and certainly not to marry someone who only values what shines." William, who had been watching the exchange of barbs between the two, intervened before the situation escalated further. "It's best you start getting along. This wedding will be in a week." Isabella remained silent, just long enough for her father to notice the contained fury in her eyes, but she knew there was no way out. Exactly a week later, Isabella married Jacob. The ceremony was an experience that deeply marked her, for the simplicity she considered almost an insult. No guests, no classical music, just her, Jacob, and a justice of the peace. Wearing a simple white dress, she barely hid her displeasure. Jacob, on the other hand, seemed calm and even disinterested, as if he were merely fulfilling an obligation. At the end of the ceremony, the judge asked if they would exchange rings. Jacob looked at Isabella and, with a serious expression, said, "I think we don't need more symbols than what we already have here, do we?" She snorted, looking away. "No, we certainly don't." Right after the wedding, they headed to Jacob's farm, and the entire trip was shrouded in silence. Upon arrival, Isabella got out of the car and was faced with the raw and rustic reality of the farm. A simple wooden house, surrounded by dirt and grazing animals in the distance. Nothing could be further from New York. She let out an exasperated sigh, looking at the house with disdain. "So this is where you live?" "Yes, and now you do too," he replied, setting her suitcase on the ground beside her. Don't treat me like I belong here, Isabella muttered. Jacob laughed. If you keep that attitude, it's going to be tough for you, but that's not my problem. That same night, Isabella got an even bigger shock. After settling into the incredibly simple bedroom, Jacob knocked on the door. Isabella, we get up at 6 tomorrow. There's a lot of work to do. She stared at him, mouth agape. Get up at 6? Jacob, I'm not going to subject myself to these farm tasks. I'm a Whitmore. I don't do manual labor. He looked at her, face impassive. Here, the name Whitmore means nothing. Either you help out or you're out. It's your choice, but I'm sure you don't want to face the consequences. With that, Jacob left the room, leaving Isabella in confused and frustrated silence. For the first time, she felt vulnerable, knowing the power she always thought she had meant nothing there. On her first morning at the farm, Isabella woke to a firm knock on the door. Opening her eyes, still groggy, she saw Jacob standing in the doorway, arms crossed. Get up, Isabella. It's past 6, he announced firmly. She closed her eyes again, turning over. Jacob, this isn't happening. I don't get up before 8, and definitely not for manual labor. But Jacob didn't budge. You're on the farm now, Isabella. Here, everyone works. If you don't start cooperating, it's going to be a long year for you. With an irritated sigh, she threw the covers aside and got up, hardly believing she was in this situation. After dressing in the simplest clothes she could find, she went outside, where the fresh morning air and the smell of damp earth surrounded her. Jacob stood there, a faint smile on his face as he saw her approach. Ready to start? He asked, as if he genuinely expected her to be. Just to be clear, Jacob, she said, crossing her arms, I'm here only because of my father's condition, so don't expect me to do more than the bare minimum. I don't expect anything else, he responded calmly. But the bare minimum here means real work, Isabella. Now, come on, I'll show you where the stable is. She followed him, stepping carefully to avoid the mud, which made her feel even more out of place. The stable was a simple place, where horses and cows rested in stalls made of old wood. Jacob handed her a shovel and a bucket, explaining that the first task of the day was to clean the place. Clean? She repeated, incredulous. You really expect me to do this? Yes, because as I said, there's no one here to do the work for you. Jacob replied seriously. Everyone does their part. Isabella held the shovel, disgusted, looking at the floor covered in hay and dirt. After a few minutes of hesitation, she started to move the hay with the tip of the shovel, trying to do as little as possible. Jacob watched from a distance, but his look made it clear he knew exactly what she was trying to do. I think you're going to need a bit more effort to finish before dark, he commented provocatively. She glared at him, huffing. I wasn't born to do this, Jacob. This isn't work for someone like me. Jacob shook his head, a corner of his mouth curling into a smile. Funny. You say that like it's some sort of noble title, but here, no one is better than anyone else, Isabella. Over the first few days, the tension between them only grew. Isabella tried to escape the tasks whenever she could, pretending to be unwell or making up excuses, but Jacob always seemed to anticipate her attempts. One afternoon, seeing her hiding under a tree to avoid a task, he approached and stood beside her. Comfortable there? He asked with irony. Much more comfortable than in the stable, she replied, not hiding her irritation. Jacob laughed, shaking his head. You still don't get it, Isabella. Here, no one is playing games. If you want to settle in, maybe you should reconsider your choices. Why do you care so much about this? After all, you were forced into this too, she retorted defiantly. He looked at her for a moment, his tone becoming more serious. I don't do this for myself. I do it for the good of my community, for the people who depend on what I produce here. This is the real world, Isabella. Isabella stayed silent, unsure of how to respond. In the days that followed, she began to notice that while she did the bare minimum, Jacob and the farm workers genuinely put in effort. She saw Tom, one of the men who helped Jacob, lifting sacks of feed and laughing as he told simple stories about his life, as if there were no difficulties at all. One morning, she watched him work and, driven by a curiosity she wouldn't admit out loud, she asked, Tom, how can you do this every day without complaining? Tom smiled kindly. Well, Miss Isabella, when you see value in what you do, the work just becomes another detail. Everyone here knows they're making a difference." She looked at him, puzzled. "That doesn't make sense. You all live with so little and seem content." Tom shrugged. "Money isn't everything, miss. Sometimes, peace is worth a lot more." Isabella couldn't shake off her conversation with Tom. She began questioning what truly held value. That night, lying on the hard bed, she thought about everything she'd heard and how people there lived without luxury, but with a satisfaction she had never felt. But pride still held her back. The next day, she confronted Jacob again. "Look, Jacob, I still think all this is a waste of time. Living in such a simple way doesn't make sense to me." Jacob shrugged again. "That's something you'll have to figure out on your own. No one can show you what it means to value things if you're not willing to see it." What she didn't realize was that slowly, every gesture and word from the people around her began planting seeds of change, though she resisted admitting it. After all, it was just the start of a long journey of adaptation. The days dragged on, and for Isabella, each one felt worse than the last. On the farm, everything seemed rough, uncomfortable, and exhausting. Every morning, Jacob was ready to wake her up at 6 sharp. And with each task, Isabella felt more out of place, frustrated with the manual labor and the complete lack of luxury she was used to. The first task each day was cleaning the stable, and Isabella still resisted, trying to avoid the duty. One morning, she leaned against the shovel, sighing, while Jacob watched her from afar, looking impatient. "Seems like you still haven't learned the importance of doing the work right," he commented, approaching. "I don't need a lecture, Jacob," she replied, looking at him irritably. "I'm here against my will. Don't expect me to do something I don't consider worthy." He smirked. "Interesting, because I don't see anything unworthy in ensuring the welfare of animals that feed those around here. But maybe you need more time to understand." Isabella rolled her eyes. "This idea of welfare is terribly boring. To me, this feels like punishment." "Punishment?" Jacob laughed, shaking his head. "It's reality for a lot of people, Isabella. Don't expect them to pity someone who's always had everything." Jacob's response made her seethe with anger, but she held back the urge to reply impulsively. However, over the week, a small change began to show. Without even realizing it, Isabella wasn't resisting the tasks as much. Every conversation she had with Tom, Ruth, and the other farm workers helped her understand a bit more of the value they placed in their simple routines. Let's play a little joke on those who only read the comments. Type chocolate in the comments. Only those who get this far will understand. Now, let's continue with the story. One evening, as she finished organizing supplies beside Jacob, she decided to ask him something that had been on her mind. "Why did you agree to marry me?" she asked, trying to mask her genuine interest with a casual tone. Jacob looked at her, surprised by the question. "Your father offered help for my community. I accepted because I knew it would be important for them." "So, that's it?" she asked, as if she'd expected a different answer. Jacob gave a humorless smile. "Yes. Did you really think it was something else?" She shrugged, trying to hide her embarrassment. "Maybe. I thought there might be a personal reason. It's one thing to accept the proposal for my father's sake. It's another to agree to live with me." Jacob stepped closer, looking her directly in the eyes with a serious expression. "I accepted for my community, but that doesn't mean I enjoy every second of this. You needed a place to learn the value of hard work, and I'm just the means to that." They were both silent for a moment. Isabella felt an uncomfortable feeling, realizing that as much as she disliked the situation, Jacob was also sacrificing his peace for her. And in a way, that made her feel a bit guilty, a feeling she wasn't very familiar with. Still, Isabella couldn't accept the changes. One morning, she refused to get out of bed, trying to ignore the start of the day's tasks. Jacob, however, didn't hesitate. He came into the room, opened the door, and pulled the covers off her. "Do you really think you can spend a year here without getting out of bed?" he asked seriously. "I wasn't born to do this kind of work, Jacob," she replied, sitting up in bed, angry. He took a deep breath, keeping his tone calm. "And I wasn't born to babysit a spoiled princess, but here we are, so let's deal with it." Isabella glared at him defiantly. "This is ridiculous. I don't have to take orders from someone like you." Jacob shrugged, leaving the room. "Maybe it's time for you to figure out what you really want. But while you're here, it's my rules." The days went by with constant bickering between the two. Isabella felt increasingly disarmed by Jacob's direct responses, as he always seemed to see through her provocations. Still, she couldn't bring herself to fully cooperate, continuing to try to evade her duties, even if her attempts became more discreet. One afternoon, during lunch, she started talking with Ruth, the elderly neighbor who always came by to help on the farm. Isabella liked Ruth's simplicity, but couldn't understand how she could be so happy with so little. "Ruth, how can you be so positive about all this?" Isabella asked hesitantly, as they shared a simple plate of salad and homemade bread. Ruth smiled, giving her a gentle look. "My dear, life isn't about what you have, but what you give. I've learned to appreciate what I've built over the years. Happiness isn't what you accumulate, it's what you share." Isabella frowned, as if trying to absorb the idea. "But have you never wanted more?" "Of course I have, but I learned that wanting more just brings more anxiety and less peace," Ruth replied. "What really brought me joy was learning to value the present, the moment, and the people around me." Ruth's words stayed with Isabella. She found herself thinking about them, questioning what really mattered. Yet pride and resistance kept her in her arrogant stance. That night, while having dinner with Jacob, Isabella let slip a question she'd been rehearsing for days. "Have you always lived like this?" she asked, looking at him with an almost curious expression. Jacob put down his utensils, a bit surprised by the question. "Yes, always, and I don't think I'd want to live any other way." "But don't you miss something bigger?" she continued, not realizing she was opening up. He smiled, a genuine smile, something rare for her. "Bigger? I see greatness here. The people who work hard, who live in a community, they are the greatest thing." Isabella rolled her eyes as if trying to defend herself. "That's very romantic, but I still think it's a limited view." Jacob laughed, shaking his head. "Maybe, for you, but for me, it's more than enough." The days went on, and Isabella found herself giving in more and more. She helped with dinner preparations, cleaned some areas of the farm without Jacob needing to ask, and at times even talked with the farm workers. One afternoon, she even accepted the task of feeding the chickens, something simple, yet it made her laugh at herself. As Isabella resisted less and opened up more, Jacob watched with curiosity. He noticed that although there was still pride in her every gesture, she was changing, and he respected her more for it. The bickering and sharp comments were less frequent, but there were still days of conflict. One morning, while they were milking the cows, Isabella sighed, exhausted. "This work is endless. How do you stand it?" "Because I see value in every effort," he replied patiently. "When you dedicate yourself to something, Isabella, you see the result in the end. That's what keeps us going." She looked at him without responding. Deep down, she was beginning to understand what he meant, but it was hard to admit. That night, after a long day of work, Isabella and Jacob sat in silence on the porch, watching the sunset. For the first time, she felt something she'd never experienced before. Peace. Without the noise of parties, without the commitments of New York, she simply existed, without worries. "I didn't know it could be so peaceful," she murmured as if speaking to herself. Jacob glanced at her and, in a softer tone, replied, "Sometimes what really matters is right in front of us, but we're too busy to see it." They exchanged a quick look, and Isabella felt that, somehow, something was changing inside her. What she didn't know was that this journey would still bring more challenges and discoveries, and her relationship with Jacob would face many twists and turns. As the weeks passed, Isabella faced the strain of a grueling routine and an environment that, to her, still felt cold and hostile. But something inside her was starting to shift. Despite her daily complaints, she no longer resisted the tasks as much. Her relationship with Jacob, however, remained tense. They lived as strangers, sharing the same space but keeping their distance. One morning, Isabella was struggling to pull a bale of hay that was heavier than she expected. Each tug made her more irritated, and sweat was dripping down her face. Jacob walked over, observing her. "Looks like you still haven't figured out how to handle this," he commented, a hint of irony in his voice. "I didn't ask for your help, Jacob," she retorted without patience. He smirked. "I'm not offering help. I just find it interesting to see someone so determined not to adapt." Isabella huffed and turned to face him, letting go of the bale. "You know, Jacob, I really don't understand why you insist on making me go through this. I could be anywhere right now, anywhere but here, dealing with this primitive work." He crossed his arms, keeping his eyes on her. "Have you ever thought that maybe that's exactly why your father sent you here? So you could finally see the value of things?" "The value of things?" She scoffed, rolling her eyes. "That's the most cliché thing I've ever heard. Maybe you find it charming, but the truth is, I'm meant for bigger things than feeding chickens and tending cows." Jacob stayed silent for a moment, then, with a steady gaze, said, "Then prove it." "Prove what?" she asked, confused. "Prove that you're capable of bigger things," he replied. "But start here. If you can't find value in what's around you, how do you expect to find value in anything else?" Jacob's response hit Isabella in an unexpected way, and she realized he was serious. Over the next few days, his words kept echoing in her mind. She still held on to her pride, but she started to sense that there might be some truth in what he said. Later, during a particularly long workday, Isabella watched Jacob chatting with Ruth and Tom. The way they laughed, exchanging stories and jokes, seemed like a distant scene from everything she knew. Without realizing it, Isabella found herself drawing closer to them, listening to their simple stories about life on the farm. Ruth noticed her and smiled kindly. "Miss Isabella, have you ever thought of telling us a story about the big city? I imagine you have some good stories from New York." Isabella hesitated but decided to share a memory of a luxurious event she had attended. As she described the details of the party, the live music, the bright lights, she realized that, instead of the admiration she was used to, the faces of her listeners showed curiosity and amazement, as if they were hearing about a world from another planet. "And does that really make you happy?" Ruth asked in the end with a doubtful expression. Isabella paused, unsure of how to respond. For the first time, she couldn't answer with certainty. That simple but pointed question planted a quiet confusion in her mind. That night, back at the farm, she confronted Jacob, still unsettled by Ruth's question. "Do you think my life doesn't make me happy, Jacob?" she asked, facing him with eyes bright with anger and uncertainty. Jacob held her gaze calmly. "I don't think anything about your life, Isabella, but have you ever wondered if any of those luxuries truly mean something to you?" She scoffed in frustration. "I like my life, Jacob. I don't need anyone questioning it." He shook his head, giving a slight smile. "Fine, but maybe one day you'll see that happiness is something you can't buy." She looked at him, annoyed, and walked away, stomping. Yet, she found herself increasingly pressured by this internal question, something Jacob seemed intent on subtly but persistently bringing to the surface. She could no longer ignore that. As much as New York was her home, that life had also brought her a void she had never managed to fill. But pride was still stronger, and Isabella continued to resist. For a week, she avoided talking to Jacob, trying to prove to herself that she could live in her own bubble, even on the farm. But that didn't last long. One afternoon, while working alone, Isabella came across a calf stuck in a fence. It was visibly frightened, and the situation made her hesitate. Normally, she would have called for Jacob, but this time she decided to act on her own. Gathering her courage, she approached the animal and started pulling at the fence to free it. After a few minutes of effort, the calf finally managed to break free. Exhausted, Isabella watched the animal run into the field, and for the first time, she felt a small sense of satisfaction for what she had done. Jacob, who had been watching from a distance, approached her with approval in his eyes. "Looks like you can handle the work better than you thought," he commented with a slight smile. "Don't exaggerate," Isabella retorted, but without her usual sarcasm. "It was just a small thing." Jacob shook his head. "Sometimes, the small things are the most important." She looked away, trying to hide the satisfaction she felt. She knew he was right, but it was still hard to admit. That night was different from the others. For the first time, Isabella began to think that maybe, just maybe, she was starting to understand a bit of this world. Let's play a game with those who only read the comments. Type pizza in the comments. Only those who make it this far will understand. Now let's continue with the story. The relationship between the two began to change subtly. Isabella and Jacob still exchanged harsh words occasionally, but there was something else, a mutual curiosity that drew them closer. During one dinner, Isabella found herself talking about the difficulties of growing up in a family where everything revolved around money and status. "I always thought life was about success and recognition," she said, not realizing she was opening up. "But I don't know if anyone really cares about me, besides what I can offer in return." Jacob listened attentively, and his eyes showed something more than simple interest. "Maybe that's what you need to understand, Isabella. Money can buy many things, but never what really matters." She remained silent, absorbing his words. It made her reflect on everything she had been learning there on the farm. The resistance she always felt seemed to weaken, and she began to realize that there was something genuine and valuable in that simple way of life. The next morning, Isabella got up before Jacob. She decided that this time she would take the initiative. She prepared breakfast and even dared to prepare a bowl of cereal for him, something she would never have imagined doing before. When Jacob appeared in the kitchen, he was taken by surprise. "Looks like someone woke up in a good mood today," he said, accepting the bowl with a grateful smile. She laughed, a bit embarrassed. "It's nothing special. I just thought you might like it." He looked at her, and for a moment she saw something in his eyes that made her feel an unexpected warmth. It wasn't just gratitude, but a silent acknowledgement that she was changing. The two continued working together, day after day, and their relationship became lighter, almost natural. The farm workers noticed the change, and even Ruth, who watched Isabella from afar, smiled with approval. One afternoon, as they walked together to the field, Jacob paused and looked at her with a sincere smile. "You know, Isabella, I never thought I'd say this, but I think you're doing well." She laughed, shaking her head. "I still can't believe I'm hearing that from you." Jacob nodded, still smiling. Sometimes people just need time to discover what they're capable of. Isabella looked at him, and for the first time, she felt that maybe she had found something she had always been looking for. A sense of belonging. There, in the midst of simplicity, she was starting to find parts of herself she had never known. As the months passed, Isabella began to feel more connected to the farm and the people around her. The life that once seemed unbearable now brought small moments of satisfaction, like the smell of wet earth after the rain, the genuine smiles of the workers, and the sunset that painted the fields in golden hues. Jacob, in turn, began to see her in a new light, recognizing a strength in her beyond luxury and vanity. One day, while they worked side by side on a fence repair project, Isabella broke the silence between them. "Jacob," she began hesitantly, "have you ever imagined a life different from the one you have here? I know the farm is your world, but have you ever thought about leaving, seeing other places?" He looked at her, surprised by the question. "No, Isabella, I never wanted a different life. I'm not like you, who always had the world at your feet. But maybe if things had been different, I might have thought about something like that." She was silent for a moment, taking in his words. "I always thought happiness was in having control of everything. But here, I've learned that sometimes you just need to let things happen." Jacob smiled, nodding. "Sometimes that's true. You don't need much to be happy. It's more about what you do with what you have." Isabella reflected on his words, feeling their weight. Over time, the layers of her new life on the farm started revealing unexpected secrets and challenges. One morning, while Isabella was helping Ruth with kitchen chores, a man showed up at the farm. He was tall, with familiar features and a broad smile that immediately caught Isabella's attention. Jacob noticed him from a distance, paused what he was doing, and smiled. "Will, it's been a while, my friend," Jacob called out, shaking the visitor's hand firmly. Will was an old friend of Jacob's, a man who had left the small town to explore the world. He and Jacob shared a deep friendship, but Will's return seemed to bring a different energy to the farm. Isabella, curious, noticed how Jacob seemed more relaxed and talkative around his friend. "So you're Isabella," Will said, looking at her with a slight smile. "I've heard a lot about you," she smiled, a bit shy. "I hope it was all good." Will chuckled. "Let's just say, seeing the farm as it is, I can tell Jacob's been a good influence on you." Isabella felt her cheeks warm up, and for a moment she glanced at Jacob, who looked away. Will's presence brought a lighter, even fun atmosphere to the farm, but gradually, Isabella started to notice something more. The friendship between Will and Jacob was strong, but Will seemed to have a critical view of Jacob's way of life, a view that, ironically, reminded Isabella of who she used to be. "Jacob, you could have gone so much further, you know?" Will said one evening as they shared a beer on the porch. "Staying tied to this farm, you're capable of more." Listening from a distance, Isabella felt uncomfortable. Although Will had his reasons, something in her felt that his comment downplayed everything Jacob had built. On impulse, she approached. "Actually, Will," she said, breaking the silence, "I think some of the biggest achievements happen here, in the simple things. Not everything that's great has to shine in the city lights." Jacob looked at her, surprised, and maybe even a bit proud. Will, on the other hand, laughed, as if challenged in a way he didn't expect. "Well, Isabella, it seems like you've really adapted," he replied, lifting his bottle in a gesture of respect. One afternoon, as Isabella was feeding the animals, she received an unexpected call. It was an old friend from New York, asking for help with a gala event they were organizing to raise funds. His voice carried a sense of urgency. "Isabella, you are the best at this. We need someone with your talent. The event's a mess," he explained. She stayed silent, considering the offer. The invitation took her back to her previous world, where everything revolved around parties, status, and luxury. For a moment, Isabella felt the temptation to return to the setting that had always felt so familiar. "I don't know, James," she replied, hesitating. "A lot has changed around here." "Come on, Isabella. It's just one event. Then you can go back to your adventure in the countryside," he insisted, laughing. "New York is still your place." After hanging up, Isabella sat there, holding the phone. The proposal made her question everything she'd experienced so far on the farm. However, she decided not to mention anything to Jacob, and the rest of the day passed in silence. That night, sitting on the porch, Jacob noticed her thoughtful expression. "Something on your mind?" he asked, still gazing at the starry sky. She shook her head, unsure how to begin. "I got a call from a friend. They want me to help organize an event in New York." Jacob looked at her, expressionless. "And what do you think about that?" "I don't know. Going back there feels like disconnecting from everything I've learned here, but it's my old life. I feel like I'm torn between two worlds." Jacob sighed, his gaze soft. "Isabella, you don't need anyone's approval to decide who you want to be. If you feel you should go, go. But just know that what you find there might not be the same as before." His words made her think. Deep down, he was right. New York called to her, but now it felt more like a memory than an anchor. As days went by, Isabella chose not to go to New York, a decision that, for her, meant finally letting go of the weight of her past. Instead, she continued helping around the farm, feeling that this was her home. Her relationship with Jacob deepened, and they found themselves talking for hours, laughing about the little things, and even sharing moments she would have never imagined months before. One starry night, Jacob finally broke the silence about something he'd kept to himself. "Isabella," he began, staring into the fire, "I know you think I agreed to this marriage just because of the deal with your father, but there's more to it." She looked at him, intrigued. "What do you mean?" Jacob took a deep breath, keeping his eyes on her. "When your father approached me, I thought he was crazy. Marrying someone like you, it was unthinkable. But over time I realized there was something more. I wanted to show you that life doesn't need fortune to be grand, and, in a way, I also wanted to get to know you." Isabella was speechless, feeling her heart race. "And now, after all this, what do you think?" He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I think I was wrong. I thought it would just be something temporary. But I've realized you're more than I imagined. Much more." Jacob's confession shook Isabella. Everything they had built, the fights, the moments of partnership, and even the teasing, started to make sense. She understood that, amid the cultural shock and difficulties, they had both changed profoundly. The two remained silent, but their exchanged glances spoke volumes. Isabella found herself torn between pride and something growing inside her, a connection that went beyond words and cohabitation. As the fire's flames cast soft shadows around them, Isabella finally let out what she had been holding inside. "Jacob, I never thought I could find something here that really mattered to me," she said, her voice trembling. "But now, I feel like it's become a part of who I've become." The moment was silent but full of meaning. From that point on, Isabella and Jacob knew that their relationship was much more than a simple agreement. And both, in different ways, began to recognize the invaluable worth they had found in each other's presence. As the relationship between Isabella and Jacob strengthened, what was once a forced coexistence marked by resistance now seemed natural and even desired. Isabella felt more at ease on the farm than she had ever imagined, and the simple routine of rural life brought a peace she had never experienced in New York. However, as with everything in life, this tranquility would not last forever. One afternoon, as Isabella and Jacob finished repairing a fence damaged by a heavy storm, a luxurious car drove up the dirt road and stopped in front of the farm. Isabella recognized the vehicle immediately. It was her father's, William's. She froze, feeling a mix of surprise and apprehension. It had been months since she had last seen her father, and now he was here, with a hard and calculating expression. William got out of the car, wearing a pristine suit, completely out of place in the rustic farm setting. His eyes fixed on Isabella, and he did not hide his displeasure at seeing his daughter dressed in simple clothes and with hands dirty from work. "Isabella," he said in a cold tone, "we need to talk." She looked at Jacob, who nodded discreetly, as if understanding that this was a conversation she needed to face alone. William gestured with his head, indicating he wanted privacy, and they moved to the porch. Isabella crossed her arms, trying to protect herself from the uncomfortable feeling her father's penetrating gaze caused. "What are you doing here, Dad?" she asked, her voice firmer than she felt. "I came to see for myself what this place has done to you," William replied, casting a disdainful look around. "And it seems my fear has been confirmed." She stared at him, not understanding. "What do you mean by that?" "I hope this experience would teach you to value real things, but not turn you into someone else. You are a Whitmore, Isabella, and you have obligations to our family and our name. This farm game has gone too far." "Farm game?" she retorted, indignant. "I really thought you sent me here because you wanted me to change, and that's what I'm trying to do." William sighed impatiently. "Don't be naive, Isabella. I hope this place would teach you some humility, but not that you would actually consider living like a farmer. Our family has a reputation to uphold, and I have plans for your future." "Plans? And what could be more than this?" Isabella crossed her arms, looking at him defiantly. William looked her in the eyes, serious. "There's an agreement to merge our companies with another corporation. And for that, I expected you to assume your position as the heir of the family, alongside someone worthy of your status." She widened her eyes, surprised and with a mix of anger. "So basically, you want me to marry someone I don't even know to secure your business interests?" William stood firm. "Isabella, this is our reality, and you know it. The question is whether you're still worthy of carrying the Whitmore name, or if you've already given up on who you really are." She looked away, feeling a surge of frustration. "Maybe you never cared to know who I really am, Dad. I've finally found something here, something I never had in New York. Peace. And that's not something your money can buy." William's expression hardened with irritation. "Peace? You think peace is more important than our family legacy? You think living among fields and animals is the future I envisioned for you?" They had reached a breaking point, and Isabella knew there was no room left for half-truths. "If you want to know, Dad," she said, her voice trembling with emotion, "yes, I found peace here, and it's something I never found by your side." William took a deep breath, his face a mixture of disappointment and frustration. "If that's what you want, then maybe I should reconsider your role in the family business. You can consider yourself out of the will, Isabella, if you choose to stay with this farmer." The decision hung in the air, and Isabella felt the weight of the choice she would have to make. New York, with all its luxuries and a guaranteed inheritance, or the farm, with Jacob and the simple yet genuine life she had found there. That evening, sitting on the porch next to Jacob, Isabella shared the entire conversation she'd had with her father. Jacob listened in silence, his expression showing understanding and maybe even a bit of discomfort. "So, he wants you to go back to New York and follow his plans?" Jacob asked, his tone carefully neutral. "Yes," Isabella replied, sighing. "He's threatening to cut me off if I don't go back and do what he calls my family duty." And deep down, I know this choice could mean losing everything I have here, including you." Jacob stayed silent, his gaze lost in the dark fields. After a moment, he took a deep breath and turned to her. "Isabella, I want you to know that if you decide to go back, I won't stop you," he said softly. "I know how much this decision means to you, and I know it's not easy." She looked at him, surprised. "Jacob, do you really think I could leave you that easily?" "I don't think it would be easy for you," he replied, "but I know this is a choice only you can make. No matter what I think, what matters is where your heart truly wants to be." She took his hand, feeling the weight of emotion. "Jacob, before coming here, I'd never met anyone like you. Someone who values things in such a genuine way. Everything I've learned here, you're a part of that." He looked into her eyes with a caring, intense expression. "Isabella, I just want you to be happy, whatever that means for us." These were feelings they had both tried to avoid admitting, but there, in that moment, they both knew something had changed forever. The choice was hers, but the love, the connection, and the transformation they'd experienced together were things they would both hold on to, no matter the decision. The next morning, Isabella woke up with a clear mind. She got dressed and walked out to the fields, where she found Jacob checking on the animals. He looked at her, curious, as she approached with a serious expression. "Jacob, I've made my decision," she announced firmly. He stopped what he was doing and turned to face her, waiting. "I choose to stay here," she said, her voice both soft and strong. "My father may have given me the world, but you've given me something I've never had, a real home." Jacob took a deep breath, a faint smile appearing on his face. He held out his hand, and she took it, feeling for the first time that she was exactly where she belonged. But before they could say anything more, a shout echoed across the farm. One of the workers was running towards them, alarmed. "Jacob! Isabella! There's a fire in the barn!" Isabella and Jacob exchanged alarmed glances and ran towards the barn. Flames had started to consume it, threatening the animals and the stored crops. Without a second thought, Jacob dashed into the barn to free the animals, while Isabella, driven by desperation and courage, helped to remove whatever she could. The fire spread quickly, and the flames lit up the sky as the farm's residents scrambled to control it. Isabella, hands covered in soot and eyes teary, worked tirelessly to help lead the animals to safety, with a determination that surprised everyone around. Jacob emerged from the barn with the last of the animals, coughing and covered in ash. Isabella ran to him and, without thinking twice, hugged him tightly. When the fire was finally under control, the farm was in chaos, but the worst had passed. The barn was destroyed, but the animals were safe. That night, after the fire, Isabella and Jacob sat exhausted on the porch, the silence between them filled with everything they had experienced. "Now I understand, Jacob," she murmured, resting her head on his shoulder. "I finally understand the value of all this, of fighting for something." He wrapped his arm around her, holding her tenderly. "You've always had that inside you, Isabella. You just needed a reason to see it." As they looked at the sky, Isabella's choice was clear. She had not only chosen the farm and Jacob, but also chosen a life with true purpose. After the barn's destruction, the reality of farm life became clearer to Isabella. She realized that every structure, every animal, every inch of land represented the effort of an entire community, and Jacob's dedication, who had invested his life in creating something meaningful. The losses were great, but Jacob and the workers didn't waste any time. By dawn, they were already discussing the necessary steps to start the reconstruction. Isabella followed each step, determined to help in any way she could. Instead of her usual resistance to work, now she was the one volunteering to organize materials, clean up debris, and coordinate whatever she could. The decision to stay there, to give up her old life, seemed firmer each day, even with the challenges that arose. Jacob watched this change with a mix of surprise and admiration. During a break, he approached Isabella, who was leaning over a pile of wood, trying to sort out the pieces that could be reused. "Isabella," he began, and she turned, wiping the sweat from her forehead. "I never thought I'd see you like this, so determined." She smiled, a smile full of meaning. "Well, you always told me I needed to learn to see the value in simple things. I guess I'm finally understanding what you meant." He nodded, and they exchanged a look filled with complicity. The connection between them had evolved into something that didn't need words. It was as if they already knew exactly what the other felt. A trust that grew each day. That night, after another long day of work, Isabella and Jacob sat on the porch, where they had a habit of reflecting on the day. The moon illuminated the landscape, and the tranquility of that night seemed restorative after so much chaos. "Jacob, I've been thinking," Isabella said, breaking the silence. "The fire was a huge loss, but maybe it's an opportunity for the farm to become something even greater. With a little planning, we could rebuild the barn in a way that brings more benefits." He looked at her, surprised by her practical vision. "What do you mean?" "I know there are many people in the community who depend on the farm. Maybe we could expand the production area or add something that benefits everyone around," she suggested, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. Jacob observed her, surprised by the passion she demonstrated. Isabella wasn't just accepting her new role, she was embracing it. "You really want to help make this happen, don't you?" she nodded. "Yes. If I'm going to stay here, I want to be part of something bigger. I want everyone to feel the same pride you feel when you look at this land." Days later, Ruth, the longtime neighbor, stopped by the farm to see how things were after the fire. Seeing Isabella coordinating tasks and distributing construction materials, Ruth smiled approvingly. "Isabella, dear, I never thought I'd see you so involved," Ruth said, holding Isabella's hands tenderly. Isabella smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest. "Well, Ruth, I think I even surprised myself. I never thought I'd feel so at home here." Ruth nodded, satisfied. "You know, Jacob is proud of you, and I think this farm has never had someone as dedicated to its future as you." Ruth's words made Isabella reflect. She had always thought of herself as an outsider, someone who would just pass through Jacob's life without leaving a mark. But now, that land and those people seemed to be a part of her. Looking at Ruth, Isabella felt a connection with the community that had accepted her, even though she was so different from them. As Isabella adapted to life on the farm, news of her new lifestyle reached New York. Her father, William, had heard about the fire and, although he didn't show it openly, was worried about his daughter's well-being. However, pride and the desire to preserve the family's legacy kept him distant, not getting directly involved. One day, Isabella received an unexpected call. When she picked up, her father's authoritative voice echoed on the other end. "Isabella, I heard about the fire," he said bluntly. "I hope that was enough to open your eyes and bring you back to the city." She took a deep breath, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. "Dad, the fire only made me more sure I want to be here. We're rebuilding, and I want to be part of it." William hesitated before responding. "Isabella, you have an entire life waiting for you in New York, with opportunities you'll never find in this place. Are you really willing to give all that up?" "Yes, I am," she replied, with a firmness that surprised her. "Here, I found something I never had in New York. I'm helping to build something real, and that means more to me than any gala event or bank account." There was a long silence on the other end, and when he finally spoke again, his voice was colder. "If that's what you want, then you're on your own. Don't expect any support from me." "I won't," Isabella replied, knowing this was a point of no return. As she hung up, she felt a weight lift off her shoulders. For the first time, she was free to live her life without her father's expectations. The call had been a final break, but also the start of a new beginning. With the help of the community and farm workers, the barn was rebuilt. But it wasn't just a physical structure. It symbolized Isabella and Jacob's strength, the bond they had developed, and the choices they'd made. Isabella was no longer an outsider. She had become part of the foundation of that farm, and everyone there saw her as someone who truly cared. On the night they inaugurated the new barn, Jacob held a small celebration for everyone who helped. Standing beside him, Isabella watched the lights, the laughter, and the soft music playing in the background. She was overwhelmed with emotion. Jacob turned to her with a smile. "It seems that in the end, this farm gained more than just a new barn." She laughed, gently touching his arm. "I think so. I gained a home, a purpose, and you." He looked at her intensely, his eyes shining in a way she'd never seen before. "And I gained someone I never expected to find. Someone who's brought new meaning to my life." It was a perfect moment. under the starry sky, surrounded by the warmth and simplicity of the people who were part of that world, Isabella felt complete. She had found her true self, something she never thought possible. Months passed since Isabella chose to stay on the farm and rebuild her life with Jacob. Each day, she felt more fulfilled by her work, the support of the community, and the growing love between her and Jacob. The farm thrived, and their relationship, once marked by resistance and conflict, had blossomed into a deep partnership and genuine affection. Isabella had finally found peace and purpose in the simplicity of that life. One day, while Isabella was helping Jacob organize the new barn, a familiar car made its way up the dirt road to the farm. Isabella stopped, recognizing the car immediately. It was her father, William. A mix of surprise and apprehension washed over her. It had been months since they'd last seen each other, and their last conversation had been a turning point where both had made their positions clear. But now he was here, and she had no idea what to expect. William stepped out of the car, dressed impeccably as usual, but this time his expression was softer, almost hesitant. Without his usual harshness, he looked out of place, a powerful man in an environment that wasn't his own. "Dad?" Isabella said, approaching him, her voice uncertain. "Isabella," he replied in a tone that was gentle, softer than she remembered. "I wanted to talk to you, daughter." He paused, as if searching for the right words. "Could we go somewhere quieter?" Sensing the importance of the moment between father and daughter, Jacob nodded respectfully and returned to his work, leaving them alone. Isabella led her father to the porch, where they sat in an uncomfortable silence. William took a deep breath, as if he needed courage to continue. "Isabella, I know our last conversation was difficult. I've spent a lot of time thinking about what you said. I always thought I knew what was best for you, but now I see that maybe I didn't understand what truly makes you happy." Isabella looked at him, surprised. Seeing her father there, willing to let go of his rigidity, was something she'd never imagined. "Dad, I know you've always wanted the best for me, but I really found my place here. I never imagined life on the farm would give me so much, but it has." William nodded, his expression revealing genuine acceptance. It's hard for a father to accept that his daughter found happiness in a place so different from what I dreamed for her. "But if this is what makes you happy, then I want you to know I'm here for you." He looked around, taking in the simple surroundings, and continued. "I want to support your choice, Isabella, and if you're okay with it, I'd like to be more present." She smiled, touched. "That means a lot to me, Dad. I've missed you." They hugged, and that gesture seemed to seal a peace they both needed. For the first time, William accepted his daughter and her choices without reservations, and Isabella felt that her happiness was finally understood by him. After that meeting, William started visiting the farm more often, integrating with Isabella's friends and getting to know Jacob better. The respect and acceptance he developed for both only grew as he saw the genuine love that united the couple. It was during one of these visits that William suggested something that made Isabella and Jacob exchange surprised looks. "Isabella, Jacob," he said with a subtle smile, "have you ever thought about having a new wedding ceremony? Something that truly represents the life you've chosen together?" Jacob looked at Isabella, and she smiled, surprised. Their first wedding was against her will, done under her father's pressure, marked by the resistance she felt. But now everything was different. She looked at Jacob and, seeing the enthusiastic sparkle in his eyes, realized that this idea made sense. "Yes, I'd love to renew our vows, this time with both of us agreeing," Isabella replied, her voice full of emotion. So, the preparations for the second wedding began. Isabella wanted a simple ceremony that reflected the genuine love and meaning of the life they had built together. Ruth, the caring neighbor, helped with the decorations, while Isabella and Jacob's friends volunteered to organize the food, prepare flowers, and set up the environment. Everyone was involved, and the farm took on a celebratory atmosphere. The wedding day arrived, and the farm was stunning. Under a blue sky and a gentle breeze, the altar was set up among the trees, decorated with wildflowers and light fabrics swaying in the wind. Isabella wore a simple white linen dress that highlighted her natural beauty and reflected her transformed essence. With William by her side, who would walk her down the aisle, Isabella felt a peace she had never experienced. Walking beside her father in that ceremony was much more than a ritual. It was the confirmation that both had accepted the journey she had chosen. William, now a proud father, looked at his daughter with admiration and affection, finally understanding the value of true happiness. Jacob waited at the altar, his face reflecting the joy and love he felt for Isabella. As he saw her approaching, he took a deep breath, moved. This time, it was a wedding of intertwined hearts, with no impositions, no doubts. Just the certainty that they were together because they wanted to be, and because they belonged to each other. William handed Isabella's hand to Jacob with an emotional smile, then stepped aside, leaving them to exchange their vows. The atmosphere was filled with silence and respect, as if nature and the entire community were blessing their union. Isabella looked into Jacob's eyes, and with a voice filled with emotion, said, "Jacob, the first time we said yes, I was a confused person and never imagined I'd end up finding my true home here. You showed me a new world, and now I'm here by free and complete choice, ready to share this life with you." Jacob held her hands firmly and responded, his eyes shining with love. "Isabella, you transformed my life in a way I never imagined. I promise to support you, love you, and share this farm and all that we are with you as my wife and partner." They smiled at each other, and under the applause and cheers of friends and family, shared a passionate kiss. It was the beginning of a new phase for both of them, a celebration of the journey that had brought them together. After the ceremony, the celebration took over the farm. Tables were set up under the trees, and the homemade food prepared by friends brought a familiar and welcoming atmosphere. William mingled with the other guests, now at ease, smiling as he saw his daughter and son-in-law's joy. He had genuinely become part of that community, and now understood that Isabella's happiness was greater than any legacy. When night fell, the dancing began. Isabella and Jacob danced together under the lights hanging from the trees, their smiles revealing the satisfaction of finally finding their place in the world, side by side. While her friends sang and danced around her, Isabella knew this was her life now. The farm, her friends, Jacob, and even the warm presence of her father. She felt like she'd found the life she'd always been looking for. And as she looked at Jacob, she knew this was only the beginning. What did you think of Isabella and Jacob's story? Share your thoughts in the comments. On a scale of 0 to 10, what would you rate this story? If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you in the next video.